Self-sabotage already?
Yeah.
It's now a bad time to need a wee. Oh, my microphone's on. Hi. I'm Dan. I lead technology and product at Not on the High Street. We're a UK-based marketplace, home to over 5,000 small creative brands. We work really hard to curate the brands and the products that are available on our platform to ensure quality and trust for our customers. That funny little word trust is what I'm going to talk about today. And I only have 15 minutes to kind of summarize something that a lot of the talks have touched on, so it could be a little bit whistle-stop. So I joined the business just over 18 months ago in the midst of post-COVID headwinds, and day one of a new VP joining, bam, planning for a reorg. I know a lot of you have had a similar experience over the last couple of years. Right-sizing an organisation is never fun for anyone involved, but occasionally a necessary part of our jobs. And just to add an additional layer of fun to anyone joining at a senior level, trust is typically called into question during a change in leadership. At Noths, there was also a stereotypical divide between technology and the business. There was even a sizable divide between technology and product. And the engineering team had been wrapped in cotton wool and put on a pedestal. Never question an engineer was the status quo, so the idea of this new guy coming in and changing things could have made me the Antichrist in the eyes of my new team. So Chief Trust Builder was in fact my new role. But what is trust? Sounds like a silly question, but I've been surprised how often people have differing concepts of it. And it's important we all form a basis of understanding in our roles, as it's the foundations of everything that we do or want to achieve. Firstly, it's not a binary concept. Most of the time, people either see it as trust or distrust. But in reality, it's a sliding scale, and it's incredibly nuanced. I really love the concept of the trust battery to help frame this. The idea is pretty simple. In order to break the binary concept, you think of trust as a battery that needs charging. And you start any new relationship at 50% charge, as you don't know enough about people to either trust or distrust them. Trust is also relative. So your trust battery is charged on a one-to-one level. So my trust battery with you would be completely different to my trust battery with you. And as a starter for 10, I tend to take direct reports and teams through this concept to get them thinking about trust and thinking about their trust levels with other people around the business. The first question tends to be, how do I charge my battery? Well, on an individual level, it's about doing what you say you will, being open, honest, humble, transparent. But in our roles as senior leaders, it's way more complicated than that, surely. Well, no, sorry to spoil. If we take this triangle as a basis of how trust is built, we can start to build objectives for ourselves to build trust in any context. For me, upwards with my board, horizontally with my peers, downwards with my direct reports, and by proxy my managers and teams. The trust triangle represents 3 core leadership traits that when trust is broken, you can trace it back to a breakdown in one of these areas. Our jobs as senior leaders is to figure out where we fall down. For most of us in this room, I'd suggest logic is fairly common, given the nature of what we do. But what I tend to find, more often than not, that the framing of that logic is not all that logical. Let me explain that for a minute. Most of us will have formed a technical strategy at some stage, but was it a good one? Good strategies should be built off of diagnosis of a problem or an opportunity. Much like a medical issue, a doctor would diagnose a problem before setting out a recovery plan and actions like taking medication. Those of you that have read Richard Rummelt's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy will know where I'm going with this. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. In order to get to a true diagnosis, you have to get involved, figure out, listen, and understand everyone's perspective and live reality of the technology and the team that you lead. In order to get to the heart of the problem, you need to be empathetic and unopinionated to really get to the core issues. From there, you need to build a guiding policy that keeps the strategy on track and simplifies the way forward. I genuinely believe that most businesses overcomplicate what they do. They fill up slides and meetings with acronyms and overcomplicated language, and when this happens, I can guarantee most people don't know what the fuck's going on. The best way I've found to be authentic is to keep things simple, because I'm a simple guy. Just get rid of the fluff. If people don't know what you're talking about, they're not going to trust you. Now, obviously, when speaking with all of your different stakeholders, like boards, investors, peers, engineers, designers, etc., you have to draw connections to the things that they value. But fundamentally, simplicity breeds clarity. And it allows you to be open and honest with the realities of any situation. Building clear and obvious actions off the back of a well-diagnosed problem and simplified policy will cement your logical approach. Actions give absolute clarity on the steps your team should make and help them see the red thread through what they are doing, as well as building a complete picture for your CEO and your boards. However, building a good strategy is only part of the story. Sure, it shows that you've understood the task at hand and you know what you're going to do to address it, but what about the harder stuff, like culture or approach? One of the problems I faced was that the engineering team was shielded from the realities of the business. The never question and engineer culture had bred a fiefdom that had kind of grown apart from the state of the market and our purpose as a business. And we were building and maintaining too much of the wrong stuff. It had become a distraction from what really made a difference, and everyone was frustrated. Part of the issue was the lack of commercial awareness in the decisions the teams were making, but mostly because of the raft of acronyms, overcomplicated P&Ls, and no real connection to what engineers care about. The other part was a lack of understanding on what the teams actually do, and a distrust that they work on things that are important for the business. Everyone was basically debating surface-level things, battling to prove their stuff was more important, and it just resulted in unhappy people on all sides. So, I took this opportunity to unleash some simplicity. Businesses exist to generate money. They may have a purpose or a mission, but this really just defines how that money's spent. It's no more complicated than that. For everyone employed by the business, there are only 3 categories of work to consider. You have to make money, you have to not spend it all, and you have to protect what you keep. This is really obvious, right? But every time I explain this, there's a visible weight lifted, and it opens up the doors to exposing engineers and technologists to the idea that their time represents an investment of revenue. And they're accountable for ensuring that that revenue is well spent. But how do you draw a picture in a way that builds trust with engineers and the business? Well, it's all about balance. A lot of the time, teams will happily build their product roadmaps in a somewhat reactive way. Customer needs and pain points, marketing requests, the board's latest thoughts on AI, a one-way dialogue that forms a sort of distrust that teams that can decide on what's important, which is ironically self-fulfilling. But what if the business really understood the jobs to be done and didn't switch off every time the lead engineer was talking about an EKS migration? The balance framework gives a great basis for talking about work using simplified language and terms that most senior leaders care about. It enables you to talk about how time invested in productivity will pay off later down the line. And if you've got the measurements right, we're able to predict when. It starts a conversation about further visibility into what goes into keeping the lights on. It enables you to help teams make elective investments in a way that makes sense to engineers and is also understandable for the rest of the business. And most importantly, it's the connective tissue between conversations around what engineering really do and what the business really wants. It gets everyone pulling in the same direction. And this is where the magic happens. Engineering teams have a framework to think about how they spend their time, what they should and shouldn't care about, and how we might reframe the build versus buy debate. The business has a better understanding of how technology and product teams operate, and has better visibility in the jobs to be done. Everyone has a common language, measurements, and reporting to base conversations around. And the business can see that technology and product actually do care about the commercials. Trust batteries start to get charged, people empower other people to do more, and the flywheel starts to turn. The balance framework ticks all of the elements that build trust. It's logical, it simplifies and demystifies often complicated language on both sides of the divide and finds a common language that enables authentic conversation. And it takes into account everyone's aims, where the one common goal is business success. However, you'll instantly discharge your trust battery if you don't deliver on your promise. And delivering should be straightforward. We already have processes, frameworks, and tools in place, but in reframing the landscape, don't forget the basics. Look for proof points, lean on your strategy, and look for early wins that fix the issues the teams face to prove your commitment to addressing things head on. Focus on metrics that show business impact rather than at team level, like DORA or SPACE. These are still really important building blocks for understanding business impact, but don't really mean anything outside of the technology context. Remember to simplify and make your reporting meaningful. Prioritize visibility and transparency. Expose delivery and product roadmaps to the wider business. And bring simplified delivery reporting against the balance framework to a wider audience. And finally, practice what you preach. Keep your battery charged. As I said, very whistle stop. If anyone's interested in talking more, hit me up on LinkedIn or grab me around the event or over some drinks tonight. Can't imagine that trust conversation is going to go too deep after a few drinks. There's also some really useful links to expand on some of the concepts that I've pulled together and talked about today. Thank you very much for your time.